Good evening. Sorry we had some technical difficulties. Thanks to Darlene and getting that, and Margaret. We're live now, so thank you for joining us. I just had a quick question. Refusing to go to the gym, does that count as resistance training? I'm just kind of curious. Anyway.
Make me laugh.
No, thank you, Karen. Appreciate that. It's good to have Karen back from Florida after what? You've been in there, 6, 8 months?
7 weeks, 5 weeks.
5, 6 weeks or whatever. So welcome back. Our study tonight is, we're back in the book of Genesis, studying the character by the name of Laban, which of course will mean we'll study some other characters whom we've studied in the past. It's our first lesson after Thanksgiving. And yes, I get it a lot. Why haven't I taken my mask off yet? And I don't have a good response to that question. So,
but this is the first lesson after
Halloween. Did I say Thanksgiving?
Yes.
Sorry, Halloween. That would make more sense because we don't have masks at Thanksgiving, do we? Unless we're trying to.
No.
Not at our house.
Not at your house. Okay. This needs some heavy editing before we put this out there for everybody. Oh, it's raw, but that's fine. So if you turn to Genesis, we're in the 24th chapter of Genesis. And in the 24th chapter of Genesis, we hear the story about Abraham. He's well along in years, and he wants Isaac, his son, to marry a woman from among his own relatives rather than a Canaanite, which is kind of interesting because he had lived among the Canaanites for a while. And I just thought, well, I guess they were good enough people to live around, but not good enough for family, right? And Abraham sends a servant to make this happen. The servant prays, and God responds and gives the servant success as he has the servant meet Rebekah. So this is just some background. So she's young, single, and beautiful, but more importantly, she was the granddaughter of Milcah and Nahor, who was Abraham's brother. So she's family. And I think that means Isaac was Rebekah's dad's, Bethuel's first cousin. Something like that.
I'm already lost.
You're already lost. Very good. So am I. So we'll go to Darlene to separate it all out. We studied Jacob, who we're going to talk about, on June the 4th, and Rebecca, and I don't remember when we studied her. But the Bible first mentions a gentleman by the name of Laban, our study for tonight, in verse 29. Anybody have that?
Now Rebekah had a brother named Laban, and he hurried out to the man at the spring.
Okay, so Rebekah has a brother named Laban. So Laban is Rebekah's brother, and then we read on then in verses 30 and 31. As soon as he had seen the nose ring and the bracelets on his sister's arms and had heard Rebekah tell what the man said to her, he went out to the man and found him standing by the camels near the spring. Come, you who are blessed by the Lord, he said. Why are you standing out here? I have prepared the house and the place for the camels. So, if this were the last, we do this a lot, or I do this a lot in studies. If this was the last we ever heard about Laban, right here, the end, and Rebekah, we know Rebekah goes on and with the servant and she marries Jacob or Isaac. What would likely be our thoughts about him if this is it? What would we think? Pretty good guy, no doubt, right? I mean, generous, perhaps, thoughtful. I mean, look, he comes right away and says, wow, you're blessed by the Lord. Quit standing there. Come on, I've prepared a place for you and your camels. Maybe, perhaps, demanding, right? He didn't give him a chance to say no, did he?
Well, I think we should have read 26
Okay, why?
and down because this tells what they were talking, what happened.
Yeah, I mean, as far as her,
Yeah,
yes, right.
but I didn't understand what the nose ring and the
Oh,
bracelet had
okay.
to do with anything.
Okay, all right. Possession. So that she was going to come back and Rebecca would be with Isaac.
Yeah,
And Laban, then her brother, was thrilled by this.
right.
Okay, and so they're all related again. They're
Right.
related. So we go down in the story. So this happens, and Rebecca is willing to go with them, and so off she goes. And then we go all the way to verse 50. And Laban says, "This is from the Lord. We can say nothing to you one way or the other. Here is Rebekah. Take her and go, and let her become the wife of your master's son, as the Lord has directed." So Laban has a hand in this because it's not just his dad that's saying, it's also her brother.
Right.
Which, it's, I mean, I guess that's the way, since he had a part in all of it, he's pretty important there. Because he allows his sister to travel to this foreign land and marry a man she had never met.
Right.
But he had something else to say there in verse 55. The guy wanted to go. He's like, okay, I'm ready. Let's go. But he spent the night. And then verse 55, Laban says, let the girl remain with us 10 days or so, and then she can go. But then the servant says in verse 56, do not detain me. Now that the Lord has granted success to my journey, send me on my way so I may go to my master. Then they said, let's call the girl and ask her about it. So they called Rebecca in and asked her if she would go with the man. And she said, well, sure, I'll go. Anything to get away from you. No, she didn't say that. Jeff's commentary. So they sent their sister, Rebecca, on her way along with her nurse, and they blessed Rebecca and say this thing. So Rebecca leaves, and she goes, and she lives happily ever after with Isaac. And that's the end of the story, and thank you for joining. No, there's more to it. So I guess the question is, why do you think Laban had a right to have a voice in this matter? Again, why? I mean, he's the brother. His dad's still alive, so her father's still alive, their father.
Well, because he is her brother,
He's her
and
brother.
he will inherit everything.
He will. Yeah, being the eldest son in the family played a role. He played a role in the hosting of the servant too.
Right.
So doing that, he had a right to voice an opinion on his sister's future. Okay. So we hear nothing more of Laban until many years later when Isaac and Rebekah send their son Jacob back to those same relatives to find a wife. So we go all the way to Genesis. We go to chapter 28. Jacob had a brother named who? Esau.
Oh, Esau, yeah.
Jacob had a brother named Esau. So they split ways. His mama liked too. Rebecca loved too.
Jacob.
She loved Jacob. That's right. So we go to 28, Genesis 28, verses 1 and 2. I guess if it worked well once, why not try it again? Correct? I mean, so that's how Rebecca came to be with Isaac. So now Isaac and Rebecca have a son, and so they send Jacob back to those same relatives. And Jacob, and let's see, so Isaac called for Jacob and blessed him and commanded him, do not marry a Canaanite woman. Again, these people are good enough to live good enough to be neighbors, but not family. Okay. And so they take a wife for yourself there in from Padanaram, and from among the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother. So that's what the instructions were. So Jacob, let's see, Jacob goes there. He's sent on his way in verse 5. And let's see, verse 6. Now, that's not important. We'll skip that. I'm trying to get to the part where they meet. Okay. Thought I had that written down. Is that 29? Okay, we're in chapter 29. And we go to verse 10. Because he's still traveling. He's on his journey. And in verse, while he was, let's see. He finds some shepherds there in verse 4, and he says, my brothers, where are you from? From Haran, they replied. He said to them, do you know Laban, Nahor's grandson? Yes, we know him, they answered. Then Jacob asked them, is he well? Unfortunately, yes, he is, they said. And here comes his daughter Rachel with the sheep. Verse 7 of chapter 29, look, he said, the sun is still high, and it's not time for the flocks to be gathered. Water the sheep and take them back to pasture. We can't, they replied, until all the flocks are gathered and a stone has been rolled away from the mouth of the well, then we will water the sheep. Verse 9, while he was still talking with them, Rachel came from her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. Here it is. Verse 10, when Jacob saw Rachel, daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and Laban's sheep, he went over and rolled the stone away from the mouth of the well and watered his uncle's sheep. Verse 11, then Jacob kissed Rachel and began to weep aloud. I love that. Good thing he didn't kiss the sheep. But he kissed Rachel. So Jacob meets Rachel, daughter of Laban. This makes Jacob and Rachel related how?
First cousins.
First cousins. I'm saying kissing cousins because that's what happened, right? There in verse 11. So then he breaks the news. She probably thought, oh, that was exciting. And then he breaks the news. We're relatives. I'm like, oh, that wasn't so great then, right? I mean, today, but back then, no problem. So she goes and tells her dad, right? And then what happens there in verse 13? What happens? You want to read
As
that?
soon as Laban heard the news about Jacob, his sister's son, he hurried to meet him. He embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his home. And there Jacob told him all these things.
Okay. So Laban's reaction to the news that his nephew is there, he runs to meet him, right? Embraces him, kisses him, and brings him home. I guess they were one of those hugs and kissy kind of families, right?
I guess.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, sounds like it. Okay, again, if the story of Laban ends now, what are your thoughts of him? Pretty good.
Yeah.
Hospitable, kind,
Yeah.
not afraid to show emotions.
Right.
Got a big bear hug. Come on,
Proud of his
son.
family?
What's that?
Proud of his family?
Proud of his family. Those things are good. Yes, my daughter's kid. You know, he didn't say nothing ever good came from my sister. You know.
Yeah.
So this was a good thing. He probably hadn't seen her since the day she left.
Right.
You know, maybe they exchanged Christmas cards or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I got that.
Probably not. Okay, so then Jacob stays for a whole month, we find there in verse 14. And then what happens in verse 15?
So he basically wants to put him to work.
Yeah.
Just because you are a relative of mine, should you work for me for nothing? Tell me what your wages should be.
So he stays for a whole month, probably worked during that month, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And Laban sees that he's a good worker. So he's like, hey, I've got somebody here, I'm going to keep him. I want to keep him. So he's going to negotiate. And it's like, what's it going to take? What's it going to take? And then in verse 16, then we learned that he had, well, I already knew he had one daughter, right? It says that he has two daughters.
Yeah.
The name of the older was Leah, and Rachel is the youngest. Leah had weak eyes, the NIV says. Anybody have anything different?
I have the NIV.
Which, I've read a lot of commentaries on that. But then it says Rachel was lovely in form and beautiful. The one I liked the best was it said that they mentioned Leah's eyes first, meaning that was her most redeeming quality. She had, instead of weak eyes, she had beautiful eyes. But Rachel, on the other hand, had everything. Leah had that, but Rachel had more. So I like that. I mean, I don't know. Some said, meant weak eyes, she just couldn't see very well. So. Things get lost in translation, but whatever we know, verse 18 tells us that Jacob fell in love with Rachel,
right,
and not Leah. And he's like, I'll work for you for 7 years in return for your younger daughter, Rachel.
Yeah.
7 years. Wow.
Why did he say that?
That was my question. Yeah. Why did Jacob make this arrangement with Laban? To work for 7 years just to marry Rachel?
Yeah.
Well, I have a commentary answer. This is not me being bright. This is just me reading commentaries. It was custom in those days for a man to present a dowry or substantial gift to the family for his future wife. This was to compensate the family for the loss of the girl. Jacob's dowry was not a material possession, for he had none to offer.
Right.
Instead, he agreed to work 7 years for Laban. So, and the thing is, we knew she was a what? Shepherdess.
Right.
So she was valuable to him.
Right.
So he didn't want to just lose her. So he said, okay, she has value. What are you willing to do to?
Yeah.
And so he's kind of paying for her.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, can you imagine if that was still the way it was today?
Yeah.
Would that be odd or what?
Yeah, that would be odd.
It'd be great if you had a whole slew of daughters. Usually that's, in our culture today, that's when they tell, if a guy has a whole slew of daughters, he swallows hard because of weddings.
Yeah.
It's typically the bride's family pays for the wedding, right? I think that's changing somewhat, maybe, hopefully. So then in verse 19, what is Laban's reaction to Jacob's offer? 7 years? Come on, man. She worked 20 years. No. He's like, pretty good deal, right? I'd rather give her to you than some other guy. Yeah. That's a lot of confidence. Well, thanks, Pops. Stay here with me. So that's what he does. I mean, it appears good to him. So did Jacob serve out the 7 years there in verse 20?
Yes, he did.
He did.
He said it seemed like only a few days.
Yeah. 7 years, I wrote it down. Because in 7 years, you're going to have at least one leap year in there.
Yeah.
2,556 days seem like just a few days. Yeah, right. Okay. He really was, thinking, how romantic.
Mercy.
Did you bring any Kleenexes? This really could be a Hallmark show. I think. Yeah. Tugs at the heart.
Especially when they read the next paragraph or two.
Yeah. Wait, it tugs at the heart, but then I patted my chest, and from Walter's joke Sunday, that's not where the heart is, right?
That's right.
Do you remember?
I remember.
They're out there going, what? What's he talking about? All right, so then Jacob then goes to Laban and tells him to keep his end of the agreement because, he wants his wife. The time's completed, and I want to be with her, right?
Right.
And so, let's see what happens in verses. Someone want to read 22 and 23?
So Laban brought together all the people of the place and gave a feast. But when evening came, he took his daughter Leah and gave her to Jacob, and Jacob lay with her.
Oh my.
Yeah.
Can you just imagine? Okay, so Laban tricked Jacob and switched brides on him, right?
Mm-hmm.
On the wedding night.
Mm-hmm.
When Jacob awoke the next morning, he found he had spent the night with Laban's older daughter, Leah. And can you just imagine Jacob's reaction? Do you think Leah looked at Jacob and said, surprise?
Well, apparently they must have not said anything. Or he would have recognized her voice or what she...
That's right. But the next day she could have said, good morning, my husband. I hope you slept well.
How do you think she felt about that?
Well, put yourself in Jacob's place. I mean,
Yeah.
What choice words would you have for Laban?
Yeah.
I mean, I've been furious. Oh, by the way, Leah was deceitful too, wasn't she? She went along with it. She's the oldest daughter. She went along. I don't know what choice she had in the matter. Maybe she did. I mean,
Who knows?
I don't know if you can. Again, it's a different culture back then. But I'm seeing a family trait here of deceitfulness. All the way back to
Rachel.
Isaac and Rebecca and all that, right? So just continuing on.
Yeah.
So Laban's deceitful, and Jacob becomes deceitful. So it's, but yeah, I think that Leah was part of it. I mean, she went along with it. How did he not recognize it? Again. Different culture. There was a feast, a celebration. Wine was probably flowing freely, whether it was fermented or whatever, but probably was.
It also said it was in the evening, so it could have been dark.
High spirits. It was evening, so probably dark, and he didn't think it wouldn't be her. He'd never been with,
Right.
Never been with the sister. They could have been similar heights. Could have had very similar, builds and all, so he wouldn't necessarily in the dark. I mean, if one was like, if Rachel's like 110 pounds and Leah's 450 pounds, there's going to be a huge day. He goes like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
what did you eat tonight? But so I would think that they're comparability. I mean, they're comparable in size and in a lot of ways, hair length and all that probably would have to be, because even in a stupor, he would recognize that, you would think, right? But again, I think just being dark, and she would want it that way. And again, she wouldn't say anything.
Yeah.
Why would she? So, but Jacob did demand an explanation, didn't he?
Yeah.
And he got one. What did Laban tell Jacob? Verses 26 and 27.
He said, it's not our custom to give the younger daughter in marriage before the older one. Finish this daughter's bridal week. Then we will give you the younger one also in return for another 7 years of work.
Another 7 years. Wow. Now, Laban, right, he knew what the custom was before he agreed to Jacob's proposal, didn't he? That didn't change.
No.
So do you think Laban ever thought of it as he watched Jacob work hard day in and day out for 7 years?
Yeah, he didn't care.
He didn't care.
No.
Probably not. He didn't care.
Did he give him Rachel before he did the second 7 years?
Yes. that's the next part of it. But during those 7 years, Laban had this plan from the get-go. This is not something this is just me. I don't think this is just something he thought of like, oh, I can get a great deal here. He probably had it all along and just rubbing his hands going, poor fool, every day. So even though those 2,556 days seem like just a few days, they probably, I don't know how they felt to Laban. And it's like, they probably did too. It's like, man, that went fast. I can't wait to get him to work another 2,556 days. But yeah, he was wrong. He was deceitful. He knew exactly that would happen. That was the custom. And again, Leah knew it too. And here's the thing, Rachel knew it too.
Yeah.
So what's that tell you? It tells, to me, it says she didn't know.
Well, I don't know what all they knew, but it's pretty obvious that they did what their dad said they had to do.
That's right. So she could have just thought, well, even though that's the custom, I'm still gonna get him.
Yeah.
So yeah, the counter offer then. Okay, where was it? So he agrees to a proposal, and now knowing, however, what we know about Jacob's past, is it somewhat difficult for us to be thoroughly upset at this injustice? Think of what Jacob had done with his mom about his brother Esau.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Two wrongs don't make a right.
No.
Correct? But he was seeing what it was like being on the other side of deception, as he was the deceiver when it came to his father Isaac and giving his brother Esau's blessing.
Right.
Now he's the deceived. Life's a little different when the shoe's on the other foot.
Yes, it is.
As the expression goes. So then, now we get to verse 27, and Laban's counteroffer then is, for another 7 years, you can have Rachel as your wife. And Jacob did so, but here's the key, Karen. He finished the week with Leah, and then Laban gave him his daughter Rachel to be his wife. So he finished out the week with her, and then he had both of them. So he worked the first 7 years for her, didn't get her right away. He had to wait a week.
Right.
Then he got her, and then he had to work 7 years.
So then he got both of them.
Yeah, so he got both of them.
2 for 1.
And maidservants too.
Yeah, they each got a maidservant.
Yeah, he each had a maidservant. So yes, he did get her, because come on, would you in his shoes said, okay, and do another 7 years? No.
No, I wouldn't.
No. Even if, he loved her, so, right?
Yeah.
So why do you think he made this arrangement to work for, well, no, here we're, okay. So he did it, there's no way you're going to be trustworthy, so he's like, you tricked me once, you're not going to trick me again. So he went ahead and he got her. And again, that's just being smart. So then that's the end of that part of it. And we move on to Rachel having a child. Well, they both have children. But Rachel gives birth to Joseph, and Jacob requested that Laban allow him to return to his homeland. We're in chapter 30, verse 25. Leah conceives, and Rachel conceives, and Rachel was barren for a while, and she prayed, and Father God opened her womb, if you remember the story. And so in verse 25, he wants to go to his homeland after she gives birth. Send me on my way, he tells Laban, so I can go back to my homeland. Give me my wives and children for whom I have served you, and I will be on my way. You know how much work I've done for you. So this is his request.
Yeah.
So what was Laban's response in verse 27?
But Laban said to him, if I have found favor in your eyes, please stay. I have learned by divination that the Lord has blessed me because of you. He added, name your wages and I will pay them.
Okay, so he has learned that he's being blessed by Jacob being there, but it kind of shows that he's sort of self-centered. I mean, he didn't really care about his daughters and son-in-law, did he?
No.
Or his grandchildren, for that matter.
No.
He was concerned about himself. I'm being blessed here, so I think you should stay. If I wasn't being blessed, you could go on your way. I guess his main goal, Laban's main goal, was to look after himself. And the way he treated others was controlled by that one goal. And unfortunately, we probably know people like that in our lives now. And then, so he asked him, though, to name his wages. And, I mean, that sounds pretty nice, doesn't it? When you like for your boss tomorrow say, hey, we'd really like the work you're doing around here. Just name your wages because we want to keep you around. Now, the question is, did Jacob see this as an opportunity to get even with Laban, or did he wash his hands and walk away? Well, we'll see in verse 28. It says what? Well, 28 says, name your wages, and then Jacob replies in 29, you know how I've worked for you and how your livestock has fared under my care. The little you had before I came has increased greatly, and the Lord has blessed you wherever I have been. But now, when may I do something for my own household? And then he says, what shall I give you? And he says, don't give me anything. But if you will do this one thing for me, I will go on tending your flocks and watching over them. And then he has the plan, okay? So he lays out the plan, and then in verse 34, Laban agrees with it. Okay? So he can't say that he didn't. And it was an interesting plan. I'm going to get into that one specifically. And then in verse 42, the animals were weak. He would not place them. So the weak animals went to Laban and the strong animals to Jacob. So he had this plan and it worked. And so Laban really can't do anything, but the plan makes Jacob really wealthy. Again, the weak animals end up there and the strong ones would. So Laban, we know, is not going to take kindly to this, because Genesis 31:1 tells us that his sons were upset, and they were saying, Jacob has taken everything our father owned and has gained all his wealth from what belonged to our father. So they're jealous, right?
I mean,
bad-mouthing him, and it's like, this is not fair. And it is unclear what this method was that Jacob used and how it worked. Some Bible scholars say that there was a belief among herdsmen that vivid impressions at mating time influenced the offspring. Most likely, the selective breeding and God's promise of provisions were the main reasons that Jacob's flocks increased.
okay, well, verse 32 in 30 says, let me go through all your flocks today and remove from them every speckled or spotted sheep,
right?
Every dark-colored lamb, and every spotted or speckled goat.
Mm-hmm.
They will be my wages, and my honesty will testify for me in the future. Whenever you check on the wages you have paid me, any goat in my possession that is not speckled or spotted, and any lamb that is not dark-colored will be considered stolen.
And he agreed with that.
Yes.
So
So, you wonder, what were these sons doing these 14 years? Taking advantage of Jacob's
Jacob. Yes.
working, and
Yes.
now they're mad.
Yeah, upset because he pulled a fast one on them, kind of, so to speak.
And he didn't
He was
really.
smart.
He
He was just smart.
he said up front what he was going to do.
He did, but God's hand was with him,
Mhm.
and he made him successful, and he knew that.
Yeah.
And his flocks increased, but they just saw after a while, like, oh wow, look, he's got all the flocks.
Yeah.
We don't. What happened here? It was a good plan until it didn't work in his favor. So then in chapter 31, in verse 3 and 4, the Lord speaks to Jacob, and he tells him to go back to the land of your fathers and to your relatives, and I will be with you. And Jacob sent word to Rachel and Leah to come out to the fields where his flocks were. Then in verses, which is kind of interesting that he did that. And why do you think Jacob needed to explain this? Well, I'll get to that in a minute. So verse 5 and 7 then, he says to them, I see that your father's attitude toward me is not what it was before, but the God of my father has been with me. You know that I've worked for your father with all my strength, yet your father has cheated me by changing my wages 10 times. However, God has now not allowed him to harm me. What does Jacob call Laban here, basically? He's dishonest. Cheater. Yeah. No good. So then he continues on with the story, how he accumulated his wealth in verses 8 and 9. Tells how he did that. And he proclaimed that God was on his side. That would imply what then? That God wasn't on Laban's side, correct? And also that Jacob wasn't doing anything wrong. God's not going to be on his side if he had done something wrong.
Well, the thing that stands out to me was back in 30:27, where he says divination. Now, in my commentary, or whatever you call it, it says the attempt to discover hidden knowledge through mechanical means.
Yes.
The interpretation of omens and the aid of supernatural powers. It is
Very
strictly
common.
forbidden to Israel.
Yeah. Very common, though, that was done back then.
I know, but that's what
reading tea leaves, kind of.
Yes. The thing is, Abraham lived for the Lord.
Yes.
But I don't know about his brother, but his nephew did not. That's
You
why.
talk about Lot?
No, I mean not Abraham. Isaac. I'm sorry.
Isaac. All right.
I'm sorry. I'm in the wrong. Or no, it was Rachel's brother, wasn't it? No, Rebecca's brother.
Rebecca's brother.
There's too many R's.
Yeah,
too many
Rebecca's
I's.
brother's Laban, who's Rachel's dad.
Yes. And that's the main thing here. And, instead of saying, well, everything comes, I can see that the Lord is helping you, why don't I live for the Lord?
Right.
Instead of that, he, comes up with all this other. So.
Yeah.
So that's why, he's calling him a cheater.
Yep. He is dishonest. He
Yeah.
was. I mean, he's not lying. But here's what we need to remember. Although Laban treated Jacob unfairly, God still increased Jacob's prosperity. God's power is not limited by lack of fair play.
Right.
So I always like to bring it into the 21st century, each character,
Yep.
and applying it to us then. We must remember that God has the ability to meet our needs and make us thrive even though others mistreat us.
Right.
To give in and respond unfairly is to be no different than our enemy.
Right.
You can't be like them. Right. Karen, would you look up Romans 12, chapter 12, verse 19, and you read that for us, because that applies here. That'll tell us why we need to not take things into our own hands. And that'll put us into the New Testament too.
Let me get my eyes focused here.
Okay.
I even have it underlined and I'm having a hard time focusing. Do not take revenge, my friends, but leave room for God's wrath, for it is written, it is mine to avenge, I will repay, says the Lord.
That's right. So in other words, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. The
Right.
Lord will take care of it. We don't have to do it.
Right.
So, and that's the, what he needed to know, Jacob needed to know. Just leave it to God, and we need to do that today. So why do you think Jacob needed to explain this to his wives? You notice he called them out and he explained to them.
Because they were leaving.
They were leaving. Yeah. And maybe just maybe he thought, yeah, who knows? Maybe they'll side with their dad. You wouldn't think they would, but, and again, it may not have been that. It may have just been, okay, I need to tell them this because we are leaving, and they didn't. And they,
Yeah, he had children with them.
whatever, they have children.
I mean,
It's not just, it's everything.
Yeah.
Going. Servants, cattle, whatever we own, we're out of here.
Yeah.
So let's pack up the house and we'll go. Can you imagine that today? It's like, if we're leaving the farm field, there's the donkeys and the horses, pigs, they're all leaving too. Wow. Laban's daughters then start talking in verses 14 and 16 of chapter 31, which is interesting. Rachel and Leah reply, do we still have any share in the inheritance of our father's estate? Does he not regard us as foreigners? Not only has he sold us, but he has used up what was paid for us. Verse 16, surely all the wealth that God took away from our father belongs to us and our children. So do whatever God has told you to do. They're certainly okay with this, right?
Yeah.
So what do we learn about this and about Laban from their words, about their lives? We learn, I guess, that leaving wasn't difficult then, was it?
no.
Because he treated them very poorly, hadn't he? Guarded them. They thought they were foreigners. Guarded them as foreigners. So here's something that is in the notes. According to custom, they were supposed to receive the benefits of the dowry Jacob paid for them, which was 14 years of hard work.
Yeah.
When Laban didn't give them what was rightfully theirs, they knew they would never inherit anything from him.
Yeah.
Thus, they approved of the plan to take the wealth and leave. So, what's the saying today? Take the money and run?
Yeah.
They were okay. All right. So Jacob decides he's not going to wait around. This is going to happen now. He's going to leave at once, and he's not going to bother to say goodbye. There's no reason to say goodbye in his mind. The guy doesn't even deserve it, probably, he's thinking. So now remember how we talked about Laban being deceitful and Jacob having this in his past as well? Now that way of doing things returns. In Genesis 31:19, we see what happens there. Laban's gone out to shear his sheep, and Rachel does what?
Stole her father's household gods.
Yes. Why, we aren't told. And then verse 20 says, Jacob deceived Laban by not telling him he was running away. So he needed to.
I don't know how you run away with all those.
I know. I know.
Yeah.
I agree. It's like, Not like just he scooted out of town.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Like a big parade. Had a sound sleep or something.
Verse 22, it says it took 3 days before he even knew it.
Yes, I know. Till I didn't realize it until the third day. So, one commentary I read said this: fearful that Laban would take his wives, children, and everything he had, Jacob fled in the night, taking what he owned. So, again, there's a history there. He didn't trust the man, rightfully so, and he had an opportunity to get out of Dodge, so to speak, and he's going to take it. I mean, he saw no advantage whatsoever to not just leave them, and saw a lot of disadvantages. And God had already told him to leave, to go.
Yeah.
So he didn't really need anything else to
No.
spur him on to do it.
No.
So he left. You know what? I forgot to start this with a prayer today.
I know.
We'll end with prayer.
Okay.
Sorry. Bad habit. So we read then in verse 23 that Laban decided to pursue Jacob, and it took him how long? 7 days, I think it says, to catch up with him. Why do you think God intervened by appearing to Laban in a dream in verse 23?
Why?
No, not verse 23. Yeah, why?
Verse
Why did
24.
God appear in a dream?
Yeah. Then God came to Laban, the Armenian, isn't that right? Armenian. In a dream at night and said to him, be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. Because it was God's plan that Jacob leave.
Yes. And he wanted Laban to know that?
Yeah.
Did God know how upset Laban would be or was?
Probably.
And
Yeah, ahead of time.
And it goes back to that verse in Romans.
Yeah.
You don't need to take care of this. I will take care
That's
of it.
right.
Yeah.
And so he wanted to protect Jacob. It's like, look, you're not going to let him die.
That's right.
Don't even think about it. Get over it. Okay. So Laban wanted to know why his pagan images were stolen, doesn't he? I mean, they pitch their tent and they go on. He gets verse 26. He says to Jacob, what have you done? Now you carried off my daughters like captives of war. Why did you run off secretly and deceive me? And if anybody knows anything about deception, it's me, he says, right? Why didn't you tell me so I could send you away with joy and singing to the music of tambourines and harps? You didn't even let me kiss my grandchildren and my daughters goodbye. You have done a foolish thing. I had the power to harm you, I'm a mighty man. But last night, the God of your father said to me, be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. Now you have gone off because you long to return to your father's house. And then here's the question, the $1 million question. Why did you steal my gods? Why did you take those? And
But
so let's back up a little bit.
Who did steal
We
them?
unpack that question. From 25 through 30, Laban said he would send them off with joy and singing to the music of tambourines. Do you think Jacob believed what Laban was telling him?
No.
Okay. Why? Because Laban was only concerned about who?
Laban.
Yeah, that's right. And this made him sound very good.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, he wanted to go, who are you now? So he wanted to know why his pagan images were stolen. Jacob didn't know. Rachel had taken them.
Right.
She hid them, well, because Laban never found them. Why did Rachel steal the household gods, do you think?
Oh.
He does answer him why he Jacob did answer Laban why he left.
Right.
But as far as the gods, he's like,
Yeah.
if someone took your gods, they'll be punished severely, right?
Yeah.
Not even live, because he didn't know. And of course,
Yeah.
again, and there's a lesson right there. don't make, and we've seen
Yeah.
that before
Yeah.
in other characters.
Yeah,
Don't do that.
right.
Because, again, he loved Rachel, and if
Right.
they would have been found on her, he would have had to keep his promise.
Yep.
And he would have lost his wife.
Mhm.
So that's foolish. It's you don't make statements like that. You can just say, if someone's stolen them, we'll get them back to you, or something like that. But you don't pronounce judgment on someone like that. And these were small wooden or metal idols. They were small things.
Right.
And they were thought to protect the home and offer advice in times of need. So the one commentary I read is maybe why she stole them is because they had legal significance. When they were passed on to an heir, the person who received them could rightfully claim the greatest part of the family inheritance. That's what it said. And that's why Laban wanted them back.
Well, but see, we know that didn't hold any water with God.
Sure. We know that, but I mean, why?
But that's why those girls were raised that way.
That's true. And sometimes what gets into the blood, it's hard to get out.
Yeah.
But also too, and this is I think a very valid point too, she feared that her father would consult them if they did have power, and then he would be able to learn of her and Jacob and all of their whereabouts. So she knew that if those had any power at all to do that, she didn't want him to know where they were.
Yeah.
But they didn't. They were just objects. So Laban couldn't find him, and he blasted him for accusing them of theft. Jacob spells it out there in 36 through 42. Laban didn't let Jacob have the last word on this matter, though, did he? How did Laban respond? And this is verse. Because, I mean, he's still upset that all this happened, that, he's, taking all them and all the sheep and.
Laban answers Jacob.
Yeah.
The women are my daughters, the children are my children, and the flocks are my flocks.
My.
All you see is mine. Yet what can I do today about these daughters of mine, or about the children they have borne? Come now, let's make a covenant, you and I, and let it serve as a witness between us. So Jacob took a stone and set it up as a pillar. He said to his relatives, gather some stones. So they took stones and piled them up in a heap, and they ate there by the heap. Laban called it Jagar. I don't know what that second word is. Sahadatha.
That sounds great.
And Jacob called it Galeed.
There you go.
Galeed. Laban said, this heap is a witness between you and me today. That is why it's called Galeed. It was also called Mezpah, because he said, may the Lord keep watch between you and me when we are away from each other. If you mistreat my daughters, or if you take any wives besides my daughters, even though no one is with us, remember that God is a witness between you and me. Laban also said to Jacob, here is this heap, and here is this pillar I have set up between you and me. This heap is a witness, and the pillar is a witness, that I will not go past this heap to your side to harm you, and that you will not go past this heap and pillar to my side to harm me. May the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judge between us. So Jacob took the oath in the name of the fear of his father Isaac. He offered a sacrifice there on the hill country and invited his relatives to a meal. After they had eaten, they spent the night there.
Yep.
Early the next morning, Laban kissed his grandchildren and his daughters and blessed them. Then he left and returned home.
Probably never saw them again. Okay, so they first have an exchange of angry words,
Yes.
and then Laban suggests they make a covenant there, as Darlene read in verse 44. This overture appears to have been motivated by fear that Jacob might return to harm him. That's verse 52. Although there is no indication that Laban worshiped the Lord, he did hold a healthy fear of him and invoked the name of Jacob's God in forming the covenant between them, verses 49 and 50. To be binding, an agreement had to be witnessed by a third party. In this case, Jacob and Laban, two deceivers, used a holy God as their witness that they would keep their word.
Yeah.
The story ends on a good note. Jacob offered a sacrifice and invited Laban and all the relatives to the meal, as Darlene read. They ate, then slept, and awoke the next morning with Laban kissing the daughters and grandchildren and blessing them before he did what? He returned home. He left. And that's it. We don't know. Nothing more.
Yep.
He did what he needed to do, I guess. But whether he knew it or not, Laban played a large part in God's plan for humanity. This is an interesting note, I think. As his grandsons would grow up to head eight of the 12 tribes known as Israel.
Yeah.
Genesis 49:28 and Revelation 21:12 tells us that. So that's pretty neat stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
All right, any questions or comments about Laban? Deceiver.
Yeah.
Yeah, some stories in there we've heard a long time, and we just kind of scratch our heads at it,
I know.
Need to bring them out and talk about them. And next week we will do Delilah. So if you want to start Delilah, yeah, one of the women you don't want to follow. Let's just put it that way. Not a good example for women.
Was in Samson's Delilah.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
All right. We haven't studied it before that I have written down.
No,
So
we haven't.
maybe a reason why. Again, a lot of these characters we studied around. So again, I apologize for us being late. Thank you for joining us. I'll have a closing prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this study of Laban. We thank you for all the characters that we study, Father God. They're so rich in what we can learn. And again, it's so amazing that some of these things happened, thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago, and still we can apply them to our lives today. It's easy to get wrapped up in ourselves sometimes, Father God, and become deceitful, and we don't want to do that, Lord. We want to just bring everything to you, and we do know, Lord, that when we do fall short, you're there to forgive us if we ask for that forgiveness, and we thank you for that. Lord, we just appreciate that your word is true, and that you will never ever leave us nor forsake us. We always take a great stand on that, Father God. I just thank you for this time. I thank you for the life that you have given us and the opportunities, Father God, that you give us to bring glory and honor to your name. We do not take that lightly. Thank you. And we ask all things in your Son, Jesus' precious and holy name. Amen. I end it. Thank you again. All right, Roger, here you go.